In recent days, something very strange has happened in my apartment. I live alone in an old building, which already has a somewhat loaded air, but I've always been very skeptical, so I thought nothing supernatural could happen here. At first, it even seemed like something banal. I was sure I had closed the bathroom door, but when I returned to the room, I realized that it was ajar. It must have been the wind, I thought, trying to convince myself. But soon more things began to occur. Objects that I had placed in specific places simply appeared in another corner, and the smell of cigarettes always seemed to appear, especially at night, although I don't smoke, nor do I have anyone around here to smoke. It was something disconcerting, but I preferred not to pay much attention, thinking it was just the stress of work or some memory failure. Over time, however, the feeling of discomfort intensified. I started to feel like I was being watched, which made me nervous, but I thought it was just paranoia. I tried to justify everything rationally. It must be the tiredness, I thought to myself. However, last night, something happened that made me doubt everything. I woke up in the middle of the night, for no apparent reason. The street light illuminated the apartment through the window, and as I turned around to try to go back to sleep, something made me freeze. The feeling that there was someone inside my apartment, somewhere, was almost palpable. The air was heavy, and I didn't know what to do. The silence was absolute, but it seemed to be loaded with an invisible presence, as if I was being watched from some dark corner of the house. I stood still, trying to hear any sound, but the silence was so absolute that my own heart seemed to make more noise than anything else. My mind was in a whirlwind, trying to make sense of what was happening. I got up slowly, feeling a strange cold in my spine. The apartment was in the dim light, except for the dim light that came from the street, but everything seemed normal. I even wondered if maybe I was dreaming. However, the smell of cigarettes was stronger than ever, and that made me realize that I wasn't imagining things. Something wasn't right. My eyes ran through the room, but everything was motionless. Even so, the feeling of being observed did not dissipate. I felt like someone was just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. I tried to convince myself that it should be just the effect of sleep, maybe stress playing a trick on me. But then I heard the sound. It was very low, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It was as if someone was walking gently through the room. My body froze. The sound came from near the kitchen. My breathing became panting, and I didn't know if I should get up and check, or if I should stay there, motionless, waiting to see if the sound would stop. Curiosity pushed me to get up again, but with every step I took towards the kitchen, the fear increased. Something inside me screamed for me to come back, but I couldn't. When I got to the kitchen, what I found was even scarier. The drawers were slightly open, some with the items out of place, as if someone had searched everything quickly. My stomach turned. But that wasn't the worst. The worst thing was the fact that the cigarette smell was stronger there, and something on the bench caught my attention. A small ashtray, which I was sure I had thrown away months ago, was there, with cigarette remains still visible. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. My vision began to blur, and everything around me seemed to get more oppressive. I went to the window, but there was no one outside. The apartment was empty, except for me. Still, I knew I wasn't alone. The feeling of presence was palpable. I went to the room, and that's where something really strange happened. The bed was undone, the sheets messy, as if someone had been lying there. But I hadn't gotten out of bed. At that moment, a scream almost came out of my throat, but something held me. I knew it was no use looking for more answers. I needed to get out of there, but I didn't know where to go. Fear took hold of me, and with each step, I felt as if the place was getting tighter, as if I was being swallowed by darkness. I never slept in that apartment again, and since that day, the strange events were erased from my mind, but the feeling of being watched, that presence, never left me. Have you ever been through a situation in which you felt you were being watched, but you couldn't explain what was happening? How did you deal with it? You know when you have that strange feeling, as if something was wrong, but you can't explain exactly what. I was never the paranoid type, but that night something made me restless. After a tiring day at work, I stopped at a convenience store to buy something quickly before going home. The place was almost empty, only the attendant behind the counter and a guy leaning near the beverage refrigerator. He seemed out of place there, as if he wasn't really interested in buying anything. It wasn't obvious at all, but I realized that he was looking at me. Not in an aggressive way, I just watched. I took a snack, paid quickly and left, trying to ignore that uncomfortable feeling. Once in the car, I started the engine and took one last look inside the store. The guy was still there, standing in the same place, but now looking directly at me. I swallowed hard and went my way. I turned on the radio to distract my mind and tried to forget. But when I entered the main avenue, something caught my attention through the rearview mirror. A black car, a few meters ago, made the same curve as me. Okay, it could be a coincidence. I kept driving normally, but with each new conversion, the car also turned. He didn't accelerate to catch up with me, he didn't blink the headlights, he just followed the same path. I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, but the bad feeling was growing inside me. I tried not to panic and followed the usual path, but something told me that I needed to test if it was just coincidence. Instead of taking the avenue that led straight home, I turned into a side street and took a route that I never took. A kind of meaningless path, full of curves and unnecessary turns. The black car followed each of them. My heart started beating faster. It was impossible for that to be normal. Who would drive like this without a specific destination? At this point, my mouth was dry, and my breathing began to get heavy. When I arrived in my neighborhood, I decided to act as if nothing was happening. I parked in my garage as usual, but before getting out of the car, I peeked through the rearview mirror. The black car passed slowly by my house and parked across the street, with the headlights off. There was no attempt to disguise it. He just stayed there. At this point, my head was already spinning with all the possibilities. A robber? Someone I knew? Any crazy guy? I took a deep breath, took my things and ran into the house, locking the door behind me. As soon as I entered, I went straight to the living room window, keeping the lights off so as not to attract attention. I moved the curtain a little away and looked at the street. The car was still there, stopped in the same place. For long minutes, nothing happened. No movement, no attempt to get out of the vehicle. Just the uncomfortable presence of someone who somehow knew where I lived. I took my cell phone and thought about calling the police, but I felt stupid. What would I say? There's a car parked on the street, and I'm scared? That wasn't a crime. Still, fear grew inside me. After a few more minutes of tense observation, I decided to test a reaction. I suddenly opened the front door, as if I were leaving home. At the same moment, the car turned on the headlights and accelerated down the street. My heart raced. The way he left there was instantaneous, as if the person knew I was watching. I tried to see the sign, but between the darkness and the strong headlights, I couldn't distinguish anything. I stood at the door for a while, trying to process everything. What did this person want? And more importantly, why were you following me? I closed the door quickly, and went to check all the locks in the house. I went through the living room, kitchen, and then I went to the back, making sure no window was unlocked. My heart was still racing. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was just a coincidence, but something inside me knew it wasn't. I turned on the television to have some sound in the room, but my attention was still stuck in the living room window. I expected the car to have left for good, but the doubt corroded me. Almost an hour passed, and I started to relax. Maybe it would have been just my paranoia. I took my cell phone to check social networks, trying to distract myself. But then something made my stomach turn. A weak lighthouse lit up the street for a brief moment, and when I looked outside, there he was again. The car had returned. But this time, he was parked a little further ahead, as if he wanted a better angle to see my house. My body frosted. This was no longer a coincidence. My mind started working fast. Did I call the police? But what would I say? Is there a car parked on the street? This wasn't a crime, and I had no proof that something wrong was happening. Still, the feeling of danger was undeniable. I tried to act normally. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, but my hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped it in the sink. I went back to the living room and hid a little behind the curtain, looking at the street. The car was still there, motionless. So something made me hold my breath. The driver's door opened slowly, and a silhouette came out of the car. You couldn't see details, just a figure standing there in front of the vehicle, as if he was waiting for something. My chest tightened. The street was completely silent, and every second that person stood still made everything even worse. I expected her to just get in the car and leave, but no. She started walking towards my house. My heart raced. I walked away from the window immediately, trying to control my breathing. I went to the door to make sure all the locks were closed. The sound of my own footsteps seemed deafening in the silence of the house. I looked through the peephole of the door, but I didn't see anyone. My stomach was turning with anxiety. I ran to the living room again, and with extreme care, peeked through the curtain slit. The man was no longer near the car. He wasn't on the sidewalk either. That's when I heard a slight squeak coming from outside, near the garage. My muscles locked. I knew it wasn't something in my head. Someone was there. I took my phone and opened the security camera app. The image loaded and my blood froze. The silhouette was now next to my house, near the backyard fence, stopped, immobile. My mind was shooting with possibilities. Was I exaggerating? Maybe it was just someone lost. But then, why would he have followed me here? And why was he standing there, next to my house, as if he was expecting something? My instinct screamed that something was very wrong. I picked up the phone and entered the police number, but I hesitated before calling. What if it was a misunderstanding? I stood there, holding my cell phone tightly, while my eyes didn't unstick from the camera screen. Suddenly he moted. Not a sudden movement, but a calculated step towards the side of the house, where I had no camera to monitor. My heart raced even more. I ran to the back, trying to see through the kitchen window. Nothing. The silence was suffocating. After a few seconds that seemed like hours, I heard the sound of something metallic moving, the lock of the side gate. My breathing got heavy. I couldn't think straight anymore. The sound of the lock left me paralyzed for a moment. I tried to calm down, convincing myself that it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just wanting to get into some nearby house. But I knew something was wrong. When I heard the sound of the footsteps again, this time closer, I moved away from the window and hid in the corner of the room. The street light illuminated the contour of my house, and I could see the shadow of it approaching. The car was still there, stopped, as if waiting for something. It was then that the side door of my gate, which was locked, opened with a low creaking. My body froze. I knew it hadn't been the wind, not so hard. The door had been opened by someone. Fear consumed me, and the feeling of impotence dominated me. I knew I couldn't face that person, and the scariest thing was that I had no idea who he was or what he wanted. But somehow, all this seemed to be part of a plan that was beyond my understanding. Silence took over the place, and I continued there, motionless, trying to hear any sign of movement. My eyes were fixed on the window, watching that strange shadow across the street. The car didn't move. It seemed that time had stopped, as if the world outside was frozen, and all I could feel was that unbearable fear. I didn't dare to look at the doors or try to make any sudden movement. My mind was 1,000, looking for an explanation for all that, but I couldn't find anything that made sense. So I decided to take one last look through the window, just to see if he was still there. With my heart beating fast, I got up slowly and looked at the other side of the house, through the kitchen window. And when my eyes focused outside, I saw something that almost scared me. The car, which was parked in front of my house, was now in my garage. Without me having heard any sound, I ran to the door, locking it with all my strength, feeling my legs shaking. But when I looked through the slee, the garage door was ajar, as if someone was inside waiting for me. I knew I needed to do something, but what? My body was paralyzed by fear. I looked out the window once more, and I didn't see the car anymore. I was outside on the street, in complete silence. I didn't know what to do, nor where to start. The feeling of being watched was so strong that I could barely breathe. I locked myself up more and more, but something told me that he wouldn't leave. I wasn't just watching. I was expecting something. I never knew what happened after that night. The car never showed up again, and for some reason, my mind refused to remember any other detail. To this day, I don't know if that was a simple nightmare or if someone was really following me. But one thing is certain, I never stop at a convenience store at night again. And if you were in my place, what would you do? I never thought I'd be telling this, but here I am. My friend and I always like to explore abandoned places, and that building in the city center was on our list some time ago. He was always famous for stories of vandalism, and the silence that took over the place was strange. When we got there, the smell of mold and the sight of graffiti everywhere were typical of these places. The building looked dead, but there was something that night that made the environment even heavier. Curiosity made us explore more deeply, so we walked through the tight and broken corridors. I, especially, was trying not to think about the stories that circulated about the place. It was just an old building, right? But then we found something that wasn't there before. In the corner of one of the corridors, there was an old, dirty mattress, crumpled as if someone had used it recently. I was silent for a moment, feeling a strange feeling that we were not alone. My eyes ran around the room, trying to understand what could be happening. There were footprints on the floor, and the dust was not intact, which meant that someone had passed by there recently. It made me uncomfortable. As if that wasn't enough, I realized something even stranger. A door that was once open was now closed. You couldn't see what was behind me, but my friend and I exchanged a look, and the tension in the air seemed palpable. The tension began to tighten, and we both knew that something was very wrong. The feeling of being watched became even stronger as we walked around the room, trying to understand what was happening. My friend was visibly uncomfortable, but he was still trying to play, saying that it was all just a coincidence, that all that was part of the charm of the place. But I couldn't help but feel a chill in my spine, as if at any moment something could jump out of some dark corner. We moved away from the mattress and started walking to the exit, determined to get out of there. But something else happened. The steps. The steps that were once far away now seemed to be right behind us. It was a subtle sound, but unmistakable, as if someone was following us. With each curve, with each turn we made, the sound increased, echoing through the narrow corridor. I knew I wasn't imagining that. I quickly looked back, but I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything else after that. The silence returned. Even so, the feeling that something was not right only increased. My heart shot when I saw the door behind us, the same one that was closed, now moving slightly, as if someone was there trying to open it. It didn't take long for us to finally decide to leave the building. But the moment we approached the exit, we heard fast, hurried steps echoing behind us. It was no longer our imagination. They were behind us. Panic took over us. Every step we took seemed to be reciprocated, as if the being behind us was getting closer every second. The corridor seemed to stretch. No matter how much we walked, it didn't reach the end. The exit door was only a few meters away, but it seemed more distant than ever. I looked at my friend, and I could see on his face the same expression of terror that I was feeling. We both knew we weren't alone there anymore. Breathing accelerated, and the hurried steps were closer than ever. I could no longer differentiate between the sound of my own steps and the steps that followed us. It was as if time had slowed down, as if we were trapped in a nightmare that we couldn't wake up. Finally, we arrived at the exit door. I pulled the handle hard, and it gave in, but not without difficulty. The feeling of relief was quick, but it didn't last long. When I quickly looked back, I saw a figure at a glance at the door of the building. It was a shadow, but it seemed that something was watching us. Without looking back again, we ran out without stopping. We only stopped when we arrived at the main street, and the building was left behind, in the distance. We didn't look back, nor did we say anything for a few minutes. The silence was deafening, and suddenly the only thing that mattered was to get out of there as soon as possible. When we finally managed to breathe a sigh of relief, we still didn't know what exactly happened. The feeling of being followed remained with us, as if something had watched us until the last moment we left the building. My friend and I tried to rationalize, but there was something indescribable in that place, something we couldn't understand. We knew we were dealing with something beyond our understanding. For weeks, we still felt as if someone was following us, as if the footprints in the corridor were still chasing us. To this day, we don't know if what happened was real or the result of our imagination. One thing is certain, we'll never go back to that building. And now, I ask you, have you ever had the feeling of being followed by something or someone you couldn't see? What would you do if you were in our situation?